Hi, welcome to Ikate's Crossing as we continue our journey of the 10th insight. I'm going to use the shamanic medicine cards to sort of think about what card can we reflect on as we're reading this chapter of the book. So let's have a look. What card are we going to reflect on as we read the chapter of this book? What imagery? Great mystery with trust. So let's have a look and see what this card is all about. Great mystery. Okay. Great mystery wafts gently in to remind you of the beauty in all things. See this beauty as a reminder as a reminder of the underlying invisible presence in all things. In the Lakota language, they say, Mitakuye Oyesin. Mitakuye Oyesin, meaning all are related. Where everything is interconnected, great mystery, Wakantanka, represents the divine power in all things, the life force of the universe. Great mystery can be appreciated through personal encounters with living spirits of the land, the elements, the directions, and all living creatures. It is time to put aside what you are doing and become part of the silence. How can you hear the truth of great mystery if it is being drowned out by modern technology? Your head is in a constant stream of worry and fears for the future. Step away from brainwashing media and reclaim your connection with truth. Great mystery will never give you anything you can't handle. So throw caution to the wind and play your part in the intricate plan of the universe. Trust that everything is working out perfectly. Great mystery revealed. Great mystery is a universal energy that permeates throughout all things. It's the beginning and the end. It is present in all beings. Great mystery is also referred to as creator. It is everything come together as one. Other divinatory meanings include a lack of self-belief separates you from the oneness of the universe. Acknowledge the part you are here to play and accept your life purpose. Everything is in perfect order and working out as it should. Daily prayer and meditation builds trust. Great mystery speaks. Father Sky and Mother Earth, divine power of death and birth. Embrace the life in all you see. Trust in the great mystery. Okay, so that was it for the card. So having a think about what does that mean for you. Let's have a look at this chapter. The chapter is called The History of Awakening. When I opened my eyes, I was in an area of rich blue light. Feeling the now familiar sense of well-being and peace, I could detect Will's presence to my left. As before, he looked enormously relieved and happy that I had returned. He moved closer and whispered, "You're going to love it here." "Where are we?" I asked. "Look more closely." I shook my head. "I have to talk to you first. It's imperative that we find this experiment and stop them. They've destroyed a hilltop. God knows what they're about to do next." "What will we do if we find them?" Will inquired. "I don't know." "Well, neither do I." "Tell me what happened." I closed my eyes and tried to center, then described the experience of seeing Maya again, particularly her resistance to my suggestion that she was part of the group. Will nodded without comment. I went on to describe meeting Curtis, communicating with Williams, and surviving the effects of the experiment. "Williams spoke to you?" Will asked. "Not really. The communication wasn't mental as with you and me. He seemed to be influencing the ideas that were coming to us in some way. It felt like information I already knew at some level, yet both of us seemed to be saying what he was trying to communicate. It was odd, but I know he was there." "What was his message?" "He confirmed what you and I saw with Maya. He said we would remember beyond our individual birth intentions to a broader knowledge of human purpose and how we could complete this purpose. Apparently, remembering this knowledge brings an expanded energy that can end the fear. In this experiment, he called it a world vision." Will was silent. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think all this is just more of the 10th insight knowledge. Please understand, I share your sense of urgency, but the only way we can help is to continue exploring the afterlife until we find out about this larger vision that Williams was trying to communicate. There must be an exact process for remembering what it is. In the distance, a movement caught my eye. 8 or 10 very distinct beings, only partially out of focus, moved to within 50 feet. Behind them were dozens more, blended together in the usual amber-coloured blur. All of them exuded a particular feeling of sentiment and nostalgia that was distinctly familiar. Do you know who these souls are? Will asked, smiling broadly. I looked out at the group, sensing kinship. I did know, but I didn't. As I looked upon the soul group, the emotional connection continued to grow more intense, beyond anything I could remember and never experiencing. Yet at the same time, the closeness was recognizable. I had been here before. The group moved within 20 feet of me, increasing the euphoria and acceptance even more. I gladly let go, turning myself over to the feeling, wishing only to bask in it, content, perhaps for the first time in my life. Waves of acknowledgement and appreciation filled my mind. Have you figured it out? Will asked again. I turned and looked at him. This is my soul group, isn't it? With that thought came a flood of memories. 13th century France, a monastery and courtyard. All around me a group of monks, laughter, closeness, then walking alone on a wooded road. 2 ragged men, ascetics, asking for help. Something about preserving some secret knowledge. I shook off the vision and looked at Will, gripped by a perverse fear. What was it I about to see? I attempted to center and my soul group edged 4 feet closer. What is happening? Will asked. I couldn't quite understand. I described what I'd observed. Probe further, Will suggested. Immediately I saw the ascetics again, and somehow knew they were members of a secret order of Franciscan spirituals who had recently been excommunicated after Pope Celestine V had resigned. Pope Celestine? I glanced at Will. Did you get that? I never knew there were popes by that name. Celestine V was late 13th century, Will confirmed. The ruins in Peru where the Ninth Insight was ultimately found were named after him when he first discovered in the 1600s. Who were the spirituals? They were a group of monks who believed that a higher awareness could be achieved by extracting themselves from human culture and returning to a contemplative life in nature. Pope Celestine supported this idea and, in fact, lived in a cave himself for a while. He was deposed of course, and later most sects of the spirituals were condemned as Gnostics and excommunicated. More memories surfaced. The 2 ascetics had approached me asking for help, and I'd reluctantly met with them deep in the forest. I'd had no choice, so entrancing were their eyes and the fearlessness of their demeanour. Old documents were in great danger of being lost forever, they told me. Later I had smuggled them back to the abbey and had read them by candlelight in my chambers, the doors closed and locked securely. These documents were old Latin copies of the 9 Insights, and I had consented to copy them before it was too late, working every moment of my spare time to painstakingly reproduce dozens of the manuscripts. At one point I was so enthralled by the insights that I sought to persuade the ascetics to make them public. They adamantly refused, explaining that they had held the documents for many centuries, waiting for the correct understanding to emerge within the church. When I questioned the meaning of this latter phrase, they explained that the insights would not be accepted until the church reconciled what they referred to as Gnostic dilemma. The Gnostics, I somehow remembered, were early Christians who believed the followers of the one God should not merely reserve Christ, but strive to emulate him in the spirit of the Pentecost. They sought to describe this emulation in philosophical terms as a method of practice. As the early church formulated its canons, the Gnostics were eventually considered willful heretics, opposed to turning their lives over to God as a matter of faith. To become a true believer, the early church leaders concluded, one had to forego understanding and analysis and continue to live life through divine revelation, adhering to God's will moment by moment, but content to remain ignorant of his overall plan. Accusing the church of hierarchy of tyranny, the Gnostics argued that their understandings and methods were intended to actually facilitate this act of letting go to God's will, that the church was requiring, rather than giving up mere lip service to the ideas the churchmen were doing. In the end, the Gnostics lost and were banished from all church functions and texts, their beliefs disappearing underground among the various secret sects and orders. Yet the dilemma was clear. as long as the church held out the vision of the transformative spiritual connection with the divine, yet persecuted anyone who talked openly about the specifics of the experience, how one might actually attain such awareness, what it felt like, then the kingdom within would remain merely an intellectualized concept within church doctrine, and the insights would be crushed any time they surfaced. At the moment I listened with concern to the ascetics and said nothing, but inwardly I disagreed. I was sure the Benedictine order of which I was a part would be interested in these writings, especially at the level of the individual monk. Later, without telling the spirituals, I shared a copy with a friend who was the closest advisor to Cardinal Nicholas in my district. Reaction came swiftly. Word arrived that the Cardinal was out of the country, but I was asked to cease any discussion of the subject and depart at once for Naples to report my findings to the Cardinal superiors. I panicked and immediately dispensed the manuscripts as widely as possible throughout the order, hoping that I might garner support from other interested brothers. In order to postpone my summons, I faked a severe ankle injury and wrote a series of letters explaining my disability, delaying the trip for months while I copied as many manuscripts as I could in my isolation. Finally, on the night of a new moon, my door was kicked down by soldiers, and I was beaten severely and taken blindfold to the castle of the local noble, where I later languished at the stock for days before being decapitated. The shock of remembering my death cast me into fear again, and created a powerful tingling in my injured ankle. The soul group continued to move several feet closer, until I managed to center myself. Still, I was left with a degree of confusion. A nod from Will told me he'd seen the entire story. This was the beginning of my ankle problem, wasn't it? I asked. Yes, Will replied. I caught his eye. What about all those other memories? Did you understand the Gnostic dilemma? He nodded and squared up to face me directly. Why would the church create such a dilemma? I asked. Because the early church was afraid to come out and say that Christ modeled a way of life that each of us could aspire to, although that is what is clearly said in the scriptures. They feared this position would give too much power to individuals, so they perpetrated the contradiction. On the one hand, the church urged the believer to seek the mystical kingdom of God within, to intuit God's will and to be filled with the Holy Spirit, but on the other hand, they condemned as blasphemous any discussion of how one might go about achieving these states, often resorting to outright murder to protect their power. So I was a fool for trying to circulate the insights. I wouldn't say a fool, Will mused. More like undiplomatic. You were killed because you tried to force an understanding into culture for its time. I looked into Will's eyes for another moment, then drifted back into the knowledge of the group, finding myself at the scene of the 19th century wars again. I was back at the meeting of chiefs in the valley, holding the same pack horse apparently just before departing. A mountain man and trapper, I was friends with both the Native Americans and the settlers. Almost all the Indians wanted to fight, but Maya had won the hearts of some with her search for peace. Remaining silent, I listened to both sides, then watched as most of the chiefs had left. At one point, Maya walked up to me. I suppose you're leaving too? I nodded affirmatively, explaining if these native medicine chiefs didn't understand what she was doing. I surely didn't. She looked at me as though I must be kidding. Then turning, she directed her attention to another person. Charlene. I suddenly recalled that she had been there. She was an Indian woman of great power, but often ignored by the envious male chiefs because of her gender. She seemed to know something important about the role of the ancestors, but her voice was falling on deaf ears. I saw myself wanting to stay, wanting to support Maya, wanting to reveal my feelings for Charlene. Yet in the end I walked away. The unconscious memory of my mistake in the 13th century was too close to the surface. I wanted only to run away, avoid any responsibility. My life pattern was set. I trapped for furs. I got along. And I didn't stick my neck out for anyone. Perhaps I'd do better next time. Next time, my mind raced forward, and I saw myself looking outward towards the earth, contemplating my present incarnation. I was watching my own birth vision, seeing the full possibility of resolving my reluctance to act or to take a stand. I envisioned how I might utilize my early family to its greatest potential, learning spiritual sensitivity from my mother, integrity and fun from my father. A grandfather would provide a connection with the wilderness. An uncle and aunt would provide a model for teething and discipline. And being placed with such strong individuals would bring my tendency to be aloof quickly into consciousness. because of their ego and strong expectation. I would at first retreat from their messages and try to hide, but then I would work through this fear and see the positive preparation they were giving me. Clearly this tendency so that I could fully follow my life path. It would be a perfect preparation, and I would leave that upbringing looking for the details of spirituality I'd seen in the insights for centuries before. I would explore the psychological descriptions of the human potential movement, the wisdom of Eastern experience, the mystics of the West, and then eventually I'd run into the actual insights again. Just at that time, they were surfacing to be brought finally into mass awareness. All this preparation and clearing would then allow me to further explore how these insights were changing human culture, and to be a part of William's group. I pulled back and looked at Will. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It hasn't exactly gone the ideal way for me either. I feel as if I've wasted the preparation. I haven't even cleared myself of the aloofness. There were so many books I didn't read, so many people that could have given me messages that I ignored. When I look back now, it seems as though I missed everything." Will almost laughed. "None of us can follow our birth visions exactly." He paused and stared. "Do you realize what you're doing at this moment? You just remembered the ideal way you wanted your life to go, the way that would have given you the most satisfaction. And when you look at how you actually lived, you're filled with regrets. Just the way Williams felt after he died and saw all the opportunities he had missed. Instead of having to wait until after death, you're experiencing a life review now?" I couldn't quite understand. "Don't you see? This has to be a key part of the 10th. Not only are we discovering that our intuitions and our sense of destiny in our lives are remembrance of our birth visions as we understand the sixth insight more fully, we're analysing where we've been off track or failed to take advantage of opportunities so that we can immediately get back on a path more in line with why we came. In other words, we're bringing more of the process into consciousness on a day-to-day basis. In the past, we had to die to engage in the review of our lives. But now we can wake up earlier and eventually make death obsolete, as the ninth insight predicts." I finally understood. So this is what humans came to Earth to do. So systematically remember to gradually awaken. That's right. We're finally becoming aware of a process that has been unconscious since human experience began. From the start, humans have perceived a birth vision, and then after birth have gone unconscious, aware of only the vaguest of intuitions. At first, in the early days of human history, the distance between what we intended and what we actually accomplished was very great, and then over time the distance is closed. Now we're on the verge of remembering everything. At that moment, I was drawn back into the knowledge of the soul group. In an instant, my awareness seemed to increase another level, and all that Will had said was confirmed. Now finally we could look at a history not as a bloody struggle of the human animal, who selfishly learnt to dominate nature and to survive in greater style, pulling himself from life in the jungle to create a vast and complex civilization. Rather, we could look at human history as a spiritual process, as the deeper systematic effort of the souls, generation after generation, life after life, struggling through the millennia towards one solitary goal, to remember what we already knew in the afterlife and to make this knowledge conscious on Earth. Okay, that's it for today. Don't forget to check the links down below, check the links on my channel, like, subscribe and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Take care and blessed be.